very much, Jamel and Pierre. We're now going on to our second part of this afternoon, competitive advantage through the latest marketing trends, big data and cloud. And as you can see, coming up onto the stage to join us, we have the Vice President, Global Consumer Insight, EMI Music, Peter Roxburgh, and Director, Brand and Digital Marketing from Hertz, Pascal Moyon. Vous pouvez les applaudir. You can give them a big round of applause. Thank you very much for being here with us. Obviously, we've been talking about competitive advantage because if we're talking about how you use social networks, it's for a purpose. We want to get some business out of it, to get a better edge than our competitors. So we thought it would be interesting. We had two examples from your domains, and it's true that Peter, music. We've been talking about music, but it's not an industry that people usually associate that much with data.
No, sure, absolutely. We've got a slide. If we can see the first slide.
So donc voilà.
Okay, so we've conducted surveys of over 1 million people in 3 years, asking them about what types of music they like, but also in terms of which brands they like, and which media channels they use, etc., across 24 countries worldwide. And this has enabled us to build a global segmentation to understand which artists are most have greatest appeal for different segments across each market. It's a huge database. Some of the brands as well we've tested via online research. We have many of the brands actually in this room today.
Can I just ask you what segments are? What is it? Age? Kind of? Is it,
sure.
How do you define segments?
Absolutely, it's a good question. So they're attitudinal and behavioral segments. We ask people about their engagement in music, but also how much they spend on music, so that we can identify people who are relatively disinterested in music to people who are passionate about music, who buy a lot of music, who go to a lot of gigs, etc., who talk to other people about music, who influence other people about music, and also to understand which of our artists have greatest appeal for different segments of the marketplace within these different countries. And that enables us to provide information to our marketing departments to help them build the campaigns to improve the connection between our artists and consumers, which at the end of the day is the overarching objective for us. In terms of some of the information we've also produced, I was going to say in terms of as well as asking people about how they consume music, we also asked them about which different media they consume, and also which brands, and some of the broader brands, including lights of Crédit Agricole, Air France, Henkel, who are here in the audience, Barclaycard, Kraft, Cadbury, etc. So that enables us to understand more about consumers in terms of their wider holistic lifestyle, but also gives us a revenue opportunity. So when some of those brands are then thinking about developing campaigns or advertising, and they're looking for music that's aligned to their brand, we can identify artists whose fans are actually keen on those particular brands. And obviously that's very important if you're a brand looking to use music to help sell your particular product or your service or your corporation. So it's been enormously successful in terms of providing a very big database. But if we go on to the second slide. Okay, thank you. So in a way, for us, the second slide is actually more important than the first one. Because we have a very passionate belief that data doesn't deliver decisions or make decisions. It's actually the people. And particularly in the music industry, it's very much a people industry. So we can provide information and insight and research, but we rely very much on our departments and our functions, and particularly on a local level. So, for instance, here in Paris, we have a very strong team in EMI France, and they will know more about their artists, such as David Guetta, and how to connect David Guetta to consumers in France than we ever will. So we work very closely with our different teams. We conduct a range of consultations. We just had one recently in Cologne with our European insight people from across the different business units to actually understand what information they needed, what information they found useful, what additional information they needed, such that we could then go and ask people in online surveys in order to provide them with information that would actually then be used to actually help connect artists to consumers.
You talk, Peter, I noticed in your notes about attitudinal and behavioral factors. What does that mean?
So obviously we want to know in terms of people's consumption behavior for music. Do they buy CDs? Do they buy digitally? Do they stream music? How many hours a day do they listen to radio? Do they go to concerts? What types of music they like? And then from an attitudinal perspective, their attitudes towards different artists, whether they're aware of those, whether they like those, and also to what degree they like them, such that we can then determine which segments have greatest appeal, both in terms of fans, but also people who are maybe just starting to discover particular artists. So we've got both the attitudinal and the behavioral side. One of the things that, for instance, that we know from a behavioral perspective is the huge importance of what we call physical music, which is CDs, versus digital. So obviously I appreciate that I'm at a big data conference, and there's obviously a huge amount of discussion about digital, but for instance in France, industry statistics are that 79% of all music bought in France is physical, and the remainder is digital. Now, you may well be buying those CDs online, but they are still CDs. In UK, it's slightly less. It's about 57%. You'd have to go to somewhere like Norway, where streaming is so huge that physical is 49%.
How do you explain that? It's very curious. Why would the French be less keen to buy things in a virtual form than in a physical form?
So I think there's digital consumption, and we are seeing increasing. We're seeing that there's two aspects really. One, we're seeing a huge growth in digital music consumption, and we're seeing the decline year on year in physical. But there is quite often an underlying appeal for most people in terms of ownership, that they may well stream music from Spotify, etc. They'll have iTunes, they'll listen to the radio, they'll watch music programs on TV, but at the end of the day, they actually like to physically own a product. And physical ownership is still really important. And remember, that's where just about all of us have come from. Very few of us are actually have grown up in the digital age. We are seeing a very, very gradual increase in vinyl as well. So although vinyl as a market is tiny, so there is that strong desire to retain ownership. I think the other thing to be aware of, though, is, and there's been some discussion of that today, is in terms of digital media consumption. And digital media consumption, of course, is growing enormously, and particularly with social media. And that's something that's become more important for EMI and for Insights in particular. And as a result, we're now going to develop a new media wave survey next year across about 30 different countries to actually understand a lot more about how consumers consume media, both digital and, of course, physical.
Okay, just out of pure curiosity, who are the French people? Où sont les Français? Manifestez-vous. Alors, beaucoup de Français. Parmi vous, qui achètent encore des CD physiques? Who still buys physical CDs? You! Wow, look, we have one on the stage. I'm interested. Why we have one on the stage? Why? You're an incredible. You've come to a day today, which is all about dematerialization of data and so forth. Why do you still actually want to buy it? Even I don't buy CDs anymore, and I'm not even in this industry. I just download things. I haven't been to a CD shop for 2 years.
Actually, I mean, it's just maybe not so much for buying the CD itself, but I was telling Peter that there's something for me which is important in France, that we have a Fnac, which for me is quite also a nice shopping experience. So it's almost when I have a spare hours.
It's become a showroom, hasn't it? So yeah, people tell me nobody buys anything in the Fnac anymore.
You do, just because you are inspired. So you just go to Fnac just to say, okay, what is the latest book or CD, and just generally I just end up buying something from them because just the experience is nice. And it's not so much, I never go just there to buy one special artist in particular, but I often come back with a couple of CDs.
You go there for the experience of the Fnac.
There we go, Alex. You can go to Fnac and buy some CDs now.
Yeah, absolutely, I'll head there soon. Let's hear about Hertz then from you. Could you give us comparative experiences, and how do you look at the latest marketing trends?
Well, actually, I think the brand is very different. So it's. Actually, I think Peter is going to make you dream today, and more kind of going to go more on the boring stuff. And just to tell you about my experience, so which is based on my current role at Hertz, but also the one I had with Thomas Cook, where kind of the remit I had was how to take what is a very traditional brand with generally as well low margin and pressure on results, and how do you make them move into the embrace the new digital marketing. So I'm probably going to talk much more about, there's a lot of data, and I don't know whether it's my slides then. Well, is there only one green button?
Diapo, donc voilà.
Okay, no, sorry. Yeah, so for me it's really about, there's a lot of data, and the main challenge is how do you embrace this sea of data without drowning. Bear in mind that quite often the skills are scarce, and the resources are scarce, and the marketing budget is scarce. And if we take this example of sailing, and for me it's really three things. So the first is getting a map, so you need to know what you want to achieve, so prioritizing objectives. So once again, it's very, very boring stuff, very basics, but very effective as well. So it's about getting a compass as well. So what are the key levers? Structure, processes, tools, and data. I'm going to have examples. And what I like, a failure, so it is a willing mistake. So it's really a mixture between a sailor, so you have to have someone who drives the boat, but also a lot on digital is about failing, it's about trying, it's about error. And probably one of the best advice I can give you is really just to test as many things as possible. And also failing, quite frankly, is great, because the world is changing and you need to learn. You need to fail to learn.
Well, what are the dominant networks and brands? Can you tell us about that for you? What has been your experience? We had this discussion this morning, but it's obviously very interesting because you have very eager customers, and how do you get in touch with them? Facebook or?
I think when once of the so we don't, quite frankly, the presence on social achievement is not huge, mainly once again for a reason of prioritization. As many companies, I guess, that most of the marketing budget is still spent on either traditional media or paid search, and there's still a lot of money to be gained by getting the basics right in these areas. Once again, it will be horses for courses. So what will appeal, what will basically apply to some companies like EMI, where the sharing and the fans and the experience is very important, might be so important for, say, I don't know, a mining company or steel company or a car rental companies, where we see basically social much more as reputation and customer service. So we are doing things on the way we want to engage with the customers is by bringing together the locations, so providing a means for our different locations, the agencies, to have a dialogue with the customers about how do I, for instance, how do I collect my car from Charles de Gaulle or Heathrow? How do I bring back the car? I'm just arriving at Terminal 2F, what should I do just to go and see
And how does that work? Is that an app? What does that
it's mainly a blog. It's a blog, and what we see is content is extremely important, and there's quite a lot of things to be done just by understanding what are the questions that the customers are asking when they want to hire a car. So it can range from questions such as, I rent my car in Nice, can I drive the car in Italy, for instance? Or I've lost 8 points on my driving license. Am I still entitled to rent a car? And we've seen, for instance, some questions say, well, what happens if I crash my car? So, and there's a lot of basically ways to engage for, I think certainly for Hertz, a lot of ways to engage by reinsuring the customers, understanding what are the questions which are going to be helpful for them, and also just to stimulate this dialogue. So there are tools today that exist where you can start a conversation and based on feedback. And an example was given to me was for a toaster, where on their site, they have basically put a place where they get reviews from customers and can engage. And they had questions from customers say, is this toaster good just for to defrost bread? And within 1 hour, there were 2 people say, yeah, I've used it, it's very nice, you get very nice bread. So it's social can have a lot of different means today. It's really just to understand in which space you need to play.
Okay, let's now talk about some of the latest marketing technologies. I think that would be quite interesting. Like we've talked about geo-localization, we talked about cloud computing and so forth. How do you see this developing? How does the latest technology, you talked about innovation, new technological advances, how can you use those to increase marketing capacity?
Okay, I mean, from our perspective, the technology is less important than understanding what the need within the organization is. So we've started to develop a project around predictive analytics, so to try and become more directional or understand more about where we believe the data may be pointing to provide more support to our marketing departments. We've developed an iPhone app. It's just closed, so before you all go onto iTunes and try and find it. So for all our EMI staff, so that to give them an understanding of the segments, they can go through the algorithm with colleagues and customers, etc., to understand which of the different segments that they fall into, depending on how they consume music and how aware, etc., they are of music. And we're always looking for ways to improve our data visualization. So that, for us, is always a key driver to try and improve the way people can use our insight and research efficiently and effectively, recognizing that most of our internal stakeholders aren't analysts. They don't have an insight or research background. So we need to ensure that we provide the information in a way that is as instant and as meaningful as possible. So,
what does that involve? Simplification?
So there's always a risk that in terms of simplifying information, you then dumb it down and you lose a lot of the potency around it. But at the same time, you don't want to provide information in a format that then people find too difficult to use and as a result don't use it. So it's always a balance, but it's always looking for ways to improve.
I think maybe I can have one example there to show, and I fully agree with Peter that we are a lot of the important is how to make data visible. So it's just a live example from Hertz, and what you can see here is basically my my business problem. Okay, so I have, say, 20 million to invest. It's not the right figure, by the way. And how do I prioritize? Which is, and this data basically is data from the internet, where you could get a market map. So what this map is the map of the search market in the UK, showing basically a breakdown between search brands and generic searches. And what we had there is, if you can see there, so on the left-hand side, you have brand searches, and the inside there was 55 to 60% of the searches for car rentals were on brand terms. So brand terms mean Avis, Europcar, Hertz. So almost 6 out of 10 people knew already which brands they wanted to engage. The second part was generic information, and it's broken down on organic search and paid search, which are roughly the same. What is really important is, I don't know whether you can see on the right-hand side, and very much at the back, is how much traffic we got from generic paid search, where we invest currently, or we used to invest almost half of the marketing budget. So when you get this kind of map, you can see, okay, where is the incremental ROI? Where should I invest? And what should I optimize? So this gives you a very easy prioritization, and from this we can work out it. Now we need to invest on brand. It's absolutely critical, because what is going to drive the best return on investment and generate the most traffic. Then we need to invest on content, and at last we need to optimize paid search. And just also to show what Peter was mentioning, the impact on visualization. This is basically the two same sets of data showing the traffic to different websites, car rental websites. On the right-hand side, on the up, it's the seasonal data, and what you get on the bottom line is the trend. So what you look at the trend is absolutely fantastic, because you can see something which is the rise on one really big competitor for us, which is a broker. And you can see at the same time as well the evolution of the Hertz traffic compared to competition, and the impact, for instance, on the recent activity we are on brand. So this is an extremely powerful way just to present the information, because at the end of the day, you need to get the buying from the management to be able to carry out actions. And you need to be able to pick your battles and to be able to express the picture in a very powerful way. And this is, I think, very much something that where you need to have strong analytical skills to be able to leverage the data. Otherwise, it's just noise.
We're talking about processing data. Can I be, my job is here to be the journalist and to receive things from the outside and to be the devil's advocate. But I've been listening to you, and it suddenly occurs to me that isn't this a little bit the contrary to innovation? Because you were talking, for example, about providing data to your customers so that they know what kind of music that their customers like, so that they can gear their advertising campaign. Well, some of the most successful advertising campaigns are totally unexpected music. The one I came from, think immediately, is British Airways, for example, when they started putting Delibes music, classical music. I'm sure if you'd have provided data, you wouldn't have come up with the, Delibes as being the most favorite thing, and yet that's something that marked them. the great success on British television over the last 5 years, the most famous campaign has been this horrible thing about meerkats. Compare the meerkats, des suricats. It's a pun in English. Compare the market.com, compare the meerkat.com. Nobody would have ever come up with that by providing data. So I'm asking you a kind of like devil's advocate question, but in processing all this data, aren't we just continuing current situations? And whereas isn't it a little bit antinomous with innovation?
I think that, well, you need to do both, and I saw an interesting presentation of someone who just said you need to have almost some people looking at the data even without any sense of purpose, so that they can come by accident, like penicillin, if you want. It's a lot of the greatest inventions actually happen by accident, but still at the end of the day, we need to, what we need to do is, there's still a lot of the work that we do is about how do you make the approach of all, and especially in digital, execution and be excellent execution, I think is part of the thing that we need to achieve, and this is where data and processes can help us. And then you need chance or
luck.
Yeah, luck.
Peter?
Yeah, certainly, I'd certainly agree with Pascal. I mean, for us, we certainly wouldn't stand in the way of innovation. Music, the creativity of an artist is paramount. The magic, the artist can create the emotional connection that they can have with you as listening to a piece of music is impossible to quantify or to define, but and that's not something we set out to do. What we set out to do is to identify those consumers that would have the strongest appeal to that particular artist, or indeed that particular track. We've tested 3,800 tracks and almost all of our music again via online panels, asking people to listen to a piece of music and saying whether they like it or dislike it on a sliding scale, also giving them a list of statements and descriptors, both positive and negative, enables us to build word clouds, so we can see the word clouds for the people who liked a piece of music and also the word cloud for the people who disliked a piece of music, compare it in terms of those different segments, so we can determine where the appeal lies, and providing support to our marketing teams to then create these wonderful campaigns. And the creativity is absolute. It's really important. That's where the marketing departments really start to earn the salaries, in terms of coming up with the new ways of engaging consumers, achieving the cut through, given the huge amount of noise and other demands for our attention nowadays. So I think fundamentally the insight and information is there to support the creative process, and it certainly doesn't get in the way of that. And we go to great lengths to ensure that people understand that insight is there as a tool. It's there to be used. The culture of the organization in EMI is fundamentally about combining insight with people's judgment, their experience, their knowledge, their local knowledge, their understanding of the artist and the importance of the music and the product that they produce.
Just one final point, because you're all talking about this massive amounts of data you're compiling from everybody. How can you find the relevant bit of information? Isn't that a problem? It's a bit like finding a needle in a haystack. How do you actually say this is what is important and not the whole of the rest of the stuff?
So I think from my perspective, that I would say that there are several needles in several different haystacks. It's never one single piece of information, and it's actually a twofold problem, really. One is providing information that people need to answer specific questions and concerns or challenges at this point of time. And that, for us, is relatively straightforward. So having built such a significant amount of data, we now are in 24 countries worldwide. We have a network of, we call them country leads, they're insight champions who understand the data inside out and also train and support their local business units. So that's relatively, if you like, the more straightforward side. The more challenging side, I think, in terms of needles in haystacks, is trying to identify what information people should be asking for, and being more proactive and trying to identify those bits of information that we may not be asking consumers about today that may become really important in the near future. And to actually then be able to go and find that information and then present it back to the audience, to our internal audience, such that they can actually we can start becoming more proactive. So I think that's the greater challenge.
Okay, and what about your needles in your haystack? How do you deal with all this massive data you must receive about your customers' uses?
Well, I think clearly for me, once again, the key thing is to have identify what is really first important. So the key things is what are the key levers that you can play with, and if you take, for instance, once again, it's specific to an industry which is arguably quite simple, which is renting cars, and the key levers we have are basically pricing and marketing. So it's really how do you play those two levers together, and when it comes to marketing, it's very simple. Where do you spend more? How can you get more out of this? How can you get better at the execution? If you want to optimize the way, for instance, the conversion from your customers is about how can I collect feedback from my customers, and I can then analyze this. So we had a great discussion with someone from another company where how do you use, for instance, session replay? Because in theory, you can basically look on the internet at every single session that any people has come on the website. The issue is when you have 100,000 sessions a day, clearly you are not going to look at every single of them. So which one do you pick? You can only look at 10 sessions a day. So you need to have an upstream of this, make sure that while you were getting feedback from customers to identify which are the key issues they have. And once you identified one sample customers, then you can drill down and watch exactly. So it's really about structuring the approach and make sure that you can really quickly identify the areas where to focus.
Okay, let's hand over perhaps Pierre, or would you like to, or Loïc, would you like to see if there's any questions perhaps in the audience for the last 10 minutes for Peter, Roxburgh and Pascal Moyon?
No question?
Please, don't be shy. Manifest yourselves. Yes, we have a question here for this gentleman over there. If you could introduce yourselves and fire away with your question.
Hi there, Richard Dennis, just about to join Nokia Here platform. Can you tell me some of the tools that you're using for your analytics and analysis?
Sure. So the tools we are using, at first we have web analytics. And when you use web analytics, something which is really interesting, really important as well, is to make sure that you can structure and normalize the data you want in the first place. So you need to have identify the list of all the dimensions and metrics you are going to be relevant to analyze. So for instance, if price is important for you, and if price for, say, a particular location, car group, or departure date is important, you need to make sure you capture this. And it may sound obvious, but it's a very technical part, and you need to, it's quite a lot of investment to be done. Then we have what we call voice of the customer, which allow you just to get some real insights from the customer on their navigation and get, and you can connect this to either things like live chat. You can even just send emails or retarget them. We just pair voice of the customer with session replay, And those two tools together are extremely powerful, and they can also help. The last tool, which is really, for me, extremely useful in web analytics, is multivariate testing. Once we have this combination of tools, you can really just structure your usability very effectively.
Okay, so touched on some of them earlier, but certainly we have a suite of online tools accessible to everyone in EMI via the internet. And they include things like brand research, so we can put in a particular brand, like British Airways, for instance, and we can identify which EMI artists have greatest appeal for British Airways. We can see that by country based on the research that we've done. We also have artist research, so we can identify, again, for EMI artists, which segments of the marketplace are most appropriate for those artists, again, by country.
Okay, take one more question, perhaps. Well, yes, we have a question. Lady here. It was you who asked the question before, wasn't it? Yes, right, lady from Ireland.
Maggie Buggy, Capgemini Consulting. Gentlemen, you spoke about single view of the customer and also obviously the role of insight, but increasingly with the clients that we're working with at Capgemini Consulting, we talk of single view of the enterprise as a really important precursor to really driving return investment from working on single view of the customer activities. And also we know that the really successful enterprises at scale in the digital space in the future will have or will exhibit unified business and IT operating models. To what extent are you at Hertz and EMI working on that unified decision-making between the CMO, COO, CIO, CTO to drive that union of the business and IT architecture? Thank you.
Well, I think this is a very traditional challenge that we have, and I don't have an answer to this. I mean, and the situation, for instance, in Hertz is e-commerce is split between IT and marketing. So, I mean, clearly we would make recommendations, and we would prioritize all the projects that we need to have online from a marketing standpoint. Ideally, you really want to have a fully integrated view, but you know, it's at the end of the day, when you have both C-levels who are CMOs and CTOs, it can, well, it's down to a people problem at the end of the day. So we can influence this, of course, and I truly believe that, well, digital can bring so much insights. We can also shape the whole customer agenda, so you can do a lot of market research and understand which product would be popular. So, for instance, if you take the case of Hertz, we can see that, well, mobility would be a great project. So, for instance, rather than buying a car, or especially a second car, you could basically offer a service where you can rent a car or have access to a car anytime you want for a fraction of the cost of owning a car. And this kind of research can come from using internet as a huge way just to survey the market.
Okay, and a final word from you, Peter?
Yeah, I mean, we don't see, I wouldn't see a problem per se. I mean, we have a huge amount of data. We have it all sitting in one very large database. We have additional sources of data like CRM database, etc., and Spotify information. But we can provide a single view of the enterprise. I don't see that as an issue.
Okay, I think we'll end it there. We're coming towards the end of the time. Thank you very much indeed, Peter Roxburgh and Pascal Moyon. Merci, et thank you very much indeed.